Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. My name is Ali and I teach you how to create business value using data. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and stay up to date on my videos, and let's learn together. In today's video, I sit down with Richad Nieves Becker, who is a data science leader, to ask him some questions about careers and data science. We touch on his background, what he thinks are important qualities in data science, how he would get into data science today, and much more. Check out the description for timestamps for different topics and enjoy the video. Today, I'm joined by Richad, who is the Associate Senior VP at Revantage within data science. I'm more from a traditional BI, maybe data analysis background, and I saw, here's this guy that seems like, he's really well versed in data science. So I really wanted to reach out and, pique your mind. So why don't you do a quick intro, and then I got a couple of questions that I want to ask you.
Yeah, sure. So I lead basically a small data science team in Revantage, and Revantage is part of the Blackstone family. Blackstone is at this point the world's largest alternative asset management firm and has the world's largest real estate portfolio of any private company that I'm aware of. I don't know if we beat the Vatican yet in assets under management, but um, so it's basically like across it's real estate, right? It's focused it's like across asset classes, across geographies. So it's like everything that you use real estate for around you, like multifamily, like the apartment I'm renting here,
Yeah.
or offices or hotels or retail or logistics. That's really hot right now because of online buying and selling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically a small team, and so I am still very hands on. My days run the gamut, from looking at results, what should we do about this? Okay,
Uh-huh.
maybe we should feature engineer this way, writing code, or just talking about it. I tend to really enjoy the research aspect of it. So like reading papers and like, okay, can we implement this? Should we implement this? And presenting to stakeholders, like almost everything a data scientist does.
Yeah.
So
I have a couple of questions, and you were already kind of into it, and I've actually written it here on the third line. But it's the self thought element and how you got into it is of course interesting. Probably for me, but probably for a lot of people also watching, because there's a lot of people who wants to learn this and get into this and are maybe doing the route that you have managed to leverage quite successfully.
mhm, sure. So how did I? What's the self-taught nature? Well, Um, firstly, I would say it's not like I didn't start without any background in scientific thinking
Hmm.
or any facility with math. I mean, I did in high school. I went up to upper level calculus, like single variate,
Yeah.
like Taylor series and Euler's identity. Like we're talking about things like that, right? So it's not like I've never seen math before. Um, in undergrad, one of my majors was neuroscience, and that was what I thought my career would be. So I was in, lab doing work like with mice and biology work, essentially neuroendocrinology, so hormones and disease and the like.
Yeah.
And we did some like very basic statistical analysis, but it wasn't. I mean, it was like the most basic things like hypothesis testing, right?
Yeah.
Um, it, yeah. So when I realized I didn't want to be in a lab because it was very isolating and it wasn't fast paced enough, I think, for me. I'd be doing things, then I'd be like, well, like I have 20 minutes, I guess I'll just scroll Facebook or something.
Yeah.
So I kind of annoyed me. I'd rather be like really in and like focused all day and be thinking hard. Like I wanted to be thinking hard more frequently than like once a month when the experiments were done. So I transitioned. I applied to 1 year business school programs. I got into uh, the same schools, University of Virginia. That's where I went.
Yeah.
There we were exposed to the idea of what data science is.
Yeah.
Um, we learned we were exposed to SQL for like 3 days,
Uh-huh.
3 to 5 days. And then we also did a customer analytics project, but we did an SPSS, so it's point and click. We didn't actually learn really a lot of the things that you would need to know to do data science, but I was exposed to the existence of these techniques.
Yeah.
And so I did for our capstone project, I basically sort of creatively combined several techniques that we had learned using SPSS into like a path and like came with some analysis, and the professors really liked it. It felt really easy and natural to me to do this. But a lot of the other students, they didn't really they were very confused by what this stuff was or what these techniques were for, what they do. So that was in the back of my mind. I
Yeah.
left business school. I actually got a job in inside sales for a
Okay.
learning and development company. So I cold calls, cold
Yeah.
emails,
Yeah.
basically all day. Researching people, sending
Yeah.
cold emails, doing cold calls, like over like 40 plus a day, which was on the
Yeah.
low end because I did more research. So I did that for 4 months, and ended up realizing it's not really a thing for me. And
Yeah.
then I was back at home with my parents. Like, what do I do with my life?
Yeah.
And yeah, like I tried to start a business teaching people how to sleep better, like improve their sleep quality. But then I also thought back, I was like, okay, start from ground zero. Okay, square one. If What were the things that were the easiest for me that I
Yeah.
really enjoyed doing that were most natural throughout my schooling? And I thought, well, that's that intro stats course. I got 100 on every test. That was really easy. And then I
Yeah.
thought, well, that customer analytics project, like I found it natural to think about, even though I didn't understand any of the underlying math. I didn't even
Mhm.
understand train test split at that time, but I
Yeah.
knew like, wow, I could find clusters of data or I could reduce the dimensionality. Like I was aware that you could do things like that. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I thought, okay, I should be a data scientist. I had my cold sales skills actually, which was very useful. So I ended up sending cold emails to hiring managers and
Okay.
skipping the resume line. I made like several
Mhm.
templates for myself and I got like interviews without submitting a resume by like pitching people directly, being like, I did a project, da, 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 and choose the right words, be very succinct and all that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, I got like a 1 out of 3 response rate with the emails that I sent.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I was like,
Nice.
wow, cool, yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, fun. And then I'd get the interviews, and they'd like me, and then I would fail the technical part every time because I just
Yeah.
didn't know what technical interviews were. I didn't realize that technical interviewing was its own separate skill. So I kept getting interviews and then failing them. And then my money was running out, especially even at home. And so then eventually I got my first job through a connection, someone my mom met on a vacation actually. And she basically, we eventually had lunch. And at the end of the lunch, she was like, all right, I got a job for you. Like, I think I would like to hire you.
Also interesting that you actually got exposed to it in school, went a different direction, a more maybe commercial direction.
Mhm.
Then you kind of came back, and maybe now you kind of come full circle, and you know how to do both things, which is really
Yeah.
cool. I think one of the things that I really wanted to ask you, and that's also a little bit on behalf of myself, is just as a professional doing this and actually doing this, out there in the business, getting dirty within a segment that, I mean, I understand real estate, but data science and real estate to me is that's diffuse. But just to the core, there's a lot of people talking about data analysts that wants to become data scientists.
Mhm.
What is like, how do you see data science where you are today, maybe versus when you first started,
Mm.
thought about it?
Oh, yes. So I suppose now compared to when I started, uh, I think I'm more aware of the context in which data science lives in organizations.
Yeah.
Meaning, data science, you might think of it as just like this thing, and you're like, I want a data science job so I can do data science things.
Yeah.
But actually, like from the perspective of the people who hire you, data science is a function, usually a new function, that is intended to serve a specific purpose. And that purpose usually gets back in some way to ROI, return on investment. So they
Yeah.
actually want to see value from data science. So they don't necessarily care like which specific techniques you're using or like how hard you tried or something like that.
Yeah.
They care more about the result. So really it's about so I've learned more about communicating
Yeah.
to different audiences, from everything from like even in my first job as a data research analyst, like we're in a pretty large company, but they I guess they noticed that I enjoy speaking. And
Yeah.
so I got a chance to present to the CEO and the C-suite what data science is. So I literally made slides and I was like, this is AI.
Yeah.
Machine learning is this subset that focuses on like mathematical optimization. And then this data science is like applying it to do that. And I was explaining like the definitions and stuff, at least as my
Yeah.
understanding at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the way from like to technical presentations to like PhDs in math, more math than I do for sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
or down to like our stakeholders, like who's this for, right? And
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
that's the most important, I would say. So I gained an appreciation for communication skills. I also gained an appreciation for like what an experienced versus entry level data scientist does or can do. Like
Okay.
I think experienced data scientists and entry level data scientists can like try models, call fit, whatever, and then
Yeah.
experienced data scientists will understand the problem at a deeper level, and they can then potentially customize the algorithm, customize their process to better fit the problem. And that's
Mm.
like one of the main differences. For example, if you're doing like time series forecasting, like I'm doing now,
Yeah.
uh, the choice of cross validation procedure, where you
Yeah.
so that you don't get data leakage, meaning
Okay.
like you don't see data from the future that makes the algorithm think that it knows what's going to happen, but actually it doesn't. You need to pretend like when you're fitting you need to train test split, right? You need to like the algorithm can only see data as of a certain date, and then it's like predict to the future that you haven't seen. And with time series, it's very easy to get spillage of like future state into like your train set. So like, how do you actually find the hyperparameters for your models? It's not a easy thing actually. And so do you want me to talk about data analyst to data scientist? Because I was more talking about like my experience then versus now, which is like entry level versus senior.
I mean, I think I think we'll definitely get there. But as you're talking, there's things I want to pick up on or I want to
Mhm.
ask about because it's very interesting. And it's, you mentioned ROI, return on investment. And I think that ROI mindset comes with a certain level of expertise and exposure and talking to certain people and then understanding, okay. And I just wanted to ask, when did you kind of see that shift in how you were thinking about that as you have progressed in your company? And it's just, maybe you were some people think about it from day one because, you talk about you worked a little bit in sales, ROI
Mhm.
goals. So then, you kind of have it in you.
Mhm.
But some people don't maybe see it that way. They might just see that, like you said, I have a technical toolkit that I want to apply, and
Mhm.
that is the company's ROI on me as a person. But the real ROI is what can you do with it and what can you make it into. I don't really care about how you do it. And then when did you
Right.
kind of pick up on that?
Yeah. Very early. Which is a fortunate thing for me because it allowed
For
me
sure.
to enter leadership in data science. Because I went from data research analyst doing individual contributor, machine learning stuff at an entry level. My next
Yeah.
job was senior data scientist, and I was basically like the only data science person in a startup environment. And then
Okay.
after that, I was where I am now, like building and leading a small team. So
Mhm.
like I entered leadership with less than 3 years of work experience, and I think that the caring about outputs and ROI was one of the key parts that allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
So let me explain. So when I was in my first job, and my first job, I think were the most formative experiences with respect to this. So I started in my first 2 weeks. No one told me what to do.
Mhm.
They actually had no projects for me. They were basically like explore and figure out your own work, which is a mindset I've taken ever since. I
Yeah.
and many data scientists will relate to this. They think they need data science, but they don't actually know what you should do specifically. So okay, I ended up thinking I want to do text because it's fun, but like I need to make it useful, obviously. So I had like some data they showed me, and I'm like, oh, I have this text, and maybe I could use the text in this field to predict these other fields, and I did, and I to POC it, I made a word cloud, did some stemming, whatever. I showed them the word cloud. I was like, look, some of the words in the word cloud match some of the fields we want to predict, and they were like, what? Go do it. And that was my project for like the entire time I was there. Was using text prediction, right? So once I made the predictions, right? Like I was like building the pipeline and cleaning the data, making the
Yeah.
forecast prediction or something. And then the question becomes, okay, now what? Now like what do I do? So I started learning because a lot of the problems were classification, like multi-class classification with a lot of categories. So I started reading more about that, and then I learned like in classification there's many potential metrics you could use to determine the performance of your algorithm. Recall and precision are two of the more well-known ones, right? And there's a trade-off between them. You might want to maximize recall or precision, and then the thought is which one you pick, or you could do both, but if you pick one, it depends on the business case. Like, is it more important that when I say something, I'm correct, precision, or is it more important that I get all of the examples in the population
Yeah.
that recall, right?
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, I actually don't know which one it is. I need to understand what this is going to be used for. So pretty early on, I was like, okay, what is this going to be used for?
Yeah.
What I'm doing, I didn't actually know. I was like, oh, we're going to use this to to populate fields and make our data more complete, which we can then sell for a premium to people who want data, because they were selling data. That was my first.
Okay.
Yes, real estate data.
Complementing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, it was like, what was most important? And so I asked, like, is it more important that when we say something, we're really confident about it, or is it more important that we say something for every result, or something? And they said, well, people in real estate, they tend to they'll pick one example where you're really wrong, and they'll be like, see, this doesn't work, because they're very like local, like their thinking is very much like, oh, this place, I know this property really well, can this machine beat my like intense knowledge with years experience? The answer is not
Ah,
right away, right? So the answer was probably precision was more important, right? Or like, so then if you're classifying something and you're getting probabilities, and then you might want to do a higher probability cutoff and like not populate unless you have reach a certain threshold, and
yeah.
then determine, things like that. So that was like how, by learning, how do I know if I'm doing well?
Yeah.
Essentially, it led to the business. What's it
Yeah.
for? So now these days I can start from the business and then try
Yeah.
to do that in the beginning in the project design, rather than figuring it out as I go.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I noticed also is that doing this made me stand out,
Yeah.
because I was the only non-PhD doing this work
Yeah.
there. There weren't like a lot. There was like two, and then there was another like older team of statisticians, but they were focusing on different things.
Yeah.
But for us, like trying to impute the data and stuff, there were three of us, and I was the non-PhD. And
Yeah.
so I was like, by asking these questions, they were like, "Oh, here's someone who cares about the outputs. Here's someone who can talk to business. Here's
Yeah.
and so some, like, say with some of the other PhDs, they were really focused on the technical aspects. I learned a ton from them. They could do things that I still can't do today, of
Yeah.
course, but I was able to be useful and differentiate myself by asking the questions that they necessarily weren't. And to be honest, some of them didn't care about it so
Mm.
much. Like they didn't like they had an algorithm, and then they were sort of just waiting for people to use it or to take instruction on the productionalization or the deployment, whatever. They were just
Yeah.
waiting for that. They weren't like going out there. Whereas I really cared about, like, is what I'm doing actually useful? And so just that caring about that like put me in the right direction. And that's how I like got really into understanding the business, and then later realized that this is like a huge differentiator and really useful in running a data science function in the first place.
Yeah. I think I think it's really, really key. And like you said, I think you're super. I mean, you can call it luck or whatever, but someone who grabs onto that early and runs with it, I think it's probably really made you stand out, because just by listening to you, there's a lot of terms around, there's a lot of
Yeah,
things
yeah.
happening. And I can imagine, if you are that business person and you're talking to you about real estate and data and confidence and probability, and like you said, if they say, okay, well, hey, if we pass this on to someone and they find a mistake in this, they're going to be skeptical.
Yeah.
That's a small piece of information, but it's really important in terms of what you deliver and what you can do with it if you sell this to someone else. So I think that's
Mhm.
really interesting and cool to hear. Really good.
Mhm.
We barely touched on this one. I know you thought this one
Sure.
was interesting,
Yeah, yeah.
and I really want to hear. You have 10 points: business knowledge, technical knowledge, and communication.
Mm,
How are you gonna distribute those in
mm.
your
I
points?
think, well, I mean, I could talk about myself,
Yeah.
but for you, for anyone, there is no right answer. It depends on what you want to do.
Mhm.
Um, I think so. I think about this from a strategic point of view, meaning how do you differentiate yourself in a market given the skills you have, what you enjoy, uh, yeah, the skills you have, what you actually like to do, and then what the market has,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It will depend on what your starting knowledge. For example, if you uh, have already a strong technical background in some way, like a strong statistics and math background, you're like writing your own optimization functions. You're able to communicate, using essentially math symbols, or write in LaTeX for papers, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe you should focus more on technical knowledge and communication. Maybe I
Mhm.
would do like 4 and then 2 for business knowledge. And then
Yeah.
maybe what you do is work in core AI development at a large, well-established company with a large, well-established data science practice, like Fang, those
Yeah.
companies. Um, that So that's for them, right? Maybe in the beginning, I really thought of it as like even.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would say like I started with, I mean, you start with like business knowledge one, technical
Yes.
knowledge two, communication. I was probably like four, like five
Yeah.
or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
so like I was pretty strong from the get go. So maybe at that time I would have been like two to six business, technical, communication. But now I would say I'm pretty even
Yeah.
actually. Is a virtue of doing greenfield opportunities like new starting data science teams, being in their early stages. Um, is yeah, I would say like business knowledge three, technical knowledge um, four, communication three, something like that.
What about if, some people that watch this will be thinking about the same questions from a point of view. If you were to hire someone, entry level or junior data scientist, how would you
Yeah,
then set up that distribution?
right. Well, I'd want someone with the most potential, meaning I think they could pick up things. Uh,
Hmm.
Communication skills tend to be somewhat harder to teach than business or technical knowledge, I've
Yeah.
found.
Yeah.
Um, what I Yeah, I would say like it depends on the population of people I interview. Now, having gone through multiple rounds of interviewing people for my team or whatever, I think communication. I look for communication skills because that's what we need. Now,
Yeah.
if I were on like the 15th data scientist, I would not think that. So it
Yeah.
really depends on the stage of the team.
True. True. Very
Right.
true.
So if I know, so what I bring is more business knowledge than them, like
Yeah.
universally. I've not seen they have the potential, but I've not seen a case where someone actually knows more real estate stuff than I do at this point, because there's not that many people in this field, which
Yeah.
is bizarre because there's so much money in it too. And it's like fun and you're working with real assets, real data and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I would say like business knowledge, I want them it ironically, business knowledge would probably be the lowest points, like maybe 2, but I
Yeah.
want to them to have the most potential. So I would actually look for, like, potential business knowledge points, like 4 or something
Yeah.
out of 10.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I understand. You want them to be
Mhm.
hungry to learn the business
Yeah.
when you take them on,
Mhm.
for
Because
sure.
what happens is that, like, um, if they have just okay technical knowledge, I know they will
Yeah.
learn it. If they have business knowledge, if they have poor business understanding, and also I think poor potential to understand, or they don't care, they don't
Yeah.
ask the right questions, they don't have the mindset of like, is this useful? Instead, they just want to play with the code and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's what who I reject, right?
Yeah.
Or like, and I have interviewed plenty of people like that, right? So that's the potential to get the business knowledge. Because what happens is that if you don't have the business knowledge, you will make a stupid mistake. You will.
Yeah.
This has happened multiple times. I've seen where someone doesn't have the business knowledge or doesn't think to ask the right business knowledge questions to get the knowledge in order to then do things technically.
Yeah.
Then they will make an assumption that makes no sense. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Doesn't align.
like all the time, especially in real estate where there's a lot of like human knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge stuck in people's heads about how things work, and you have
Yeah.
to like ask the right questions to make sure you're not assuming things you shouldn't. So I'd say like business knowledge, I want the most potential, but they can start out with the least.
Yeah.
Communication, I would say 3, and technical knowledge 3. So at this point, I look for generalists. But
Yeah.
as the team develops, I'd probably look for someone with more technical knowledge who can potentially work more internally, doesn't care as much about stakeholder communication, and can really drive like what we're doing forward, say with respect to ML ops, like production, um, data engineering, or like very, very strong math where they can customize solutions, or they come with like subject matter expertise in a particular field like time series or financial forecasting or something like that.
Yeah. When you have the
Mhm.
size to specialize and kind of fine
Yes.
tune.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Hmm.
So you almost jumped on this one before.
Hmm.
But if you were to get into the business today, you spoke a little bit about the way you got there, a little bit of into sales and then back home and then some courses and then, introductions,
Hmm.
networking seems like it worked really well for you. But if you were to do it, today, and I guess, you are on LinkedIn, you see people asking questions, all
Hmm.
these different ways of getting there. How would you go about doing it today?
Yeah, I would do it same fundamentals, very different approach today.
Yeah.
If I were doing it today, I would play more of the long game, and I would avoid the
Testing.
perfectionist mindset. I would
Interesting.
probably like try to publish a very basic side project or an outline of a side project
Uh-huh.
in 2 days,
Okay.
like 2 days, right?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, this is what and I'd write out like an outline, like this is where the feature engineering module will go. This is where the I'll like make an outline, and I would spend a lot of time like figuring out like which specific business problem to solve.
Uh-huh.
In the past, I wanted to figure out like the hardest, most interesting problem to do as a side project, but it
Yeah.
ended up being like making me never release it, sort of thing. Like I wouldn't publish, and I'd be afraid, what if they see this and they're like, "What is this nonsense? Rejected forever," you know? Like it's not
Yeah.
how this works. Okay.
Yeah.
I was afraid of this. This is a real fear. It stopped me from publishing side projects. But I probably get a basic version up really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
even without much code, where I just outline what I'm going to do and how the structure is. I want to
Yeah.
start with this. I want to do this and this and this, and then I'd fill in those modules over time. I would publish. I would commit code every day. Then I would post every day on LinkedIn what I did that day.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Okay.
I'm doing a project with this, and this is the business case. And I would focus on my writing skills in order to like be able to succinctly describe what the problem is in a way that would be genuinely interesting to some people. And then I'd post every day like I did this, and I'd probably have like a little screen capture of like the code that I wrote or something like that. And
Yeah.
then yeah, I would basically. So what this shows is that I can build iteratively, I can build quickly, and I'm doing stuff every day. And these are like great qualities for data science and industry. So even
Yeah.
if you don't have it complete yet, it basically shows I have the right work style
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
industry, right?
Sure.
After that, I would start with a hypothesis. Think of this like kind of Bayesian, right? Okay. So like I have a prior. I'm like, I think I'm interested in this. I had no idea I would care about real estate
Mm-hmm.
when I started. I thought I wanted to do music data science or something like music generation or classification or recommendation engine or something like that because I like music a lot.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I really tried to focus on that, but it was like too difficult. It was too far ahead of my current knowledge at that time. So
Okay.
it made me feel like stressed trying to learn it all and rushing. So what I'd
Yeah.
probably do is actually like I have a hypothesis of what I think I care about. At
Mm-hmm.
the same time of committing this code, doing these projects, because you can always commit and then change the project design later. You can do
Yeah.
this. Like no one's
Yeah.
gonna stop you, right? So like as you figure out as you're doing your project, do I actually like this? Is this subject actually interesting to me? What are
Uh-huh.
my favorite parts of the project? What are my least favorite parts of the project? And that gives you an idea of how to specialize. So then you can be
Mm-hmm.
like, when I was doing the side project, I learned XYZ about myself. This is like, and I think I could contribute these specific things to your team or something like that. At the
Yeah.
same time, I'd be doing constant informational interviews and then also like doing cold pitches to hiring managers for like open positions.
Yeah.
The informational interviews to like just learn like, and then you talk about your side project. You'd be like, I'm doing this. Like, how would you improve it to make it more relevant to industry or something? And then you'll get some ideas. Maybe you'll apply it. Then, like 2 weeks later, you'd be like, I applied what you said, and this is what I did. If you're curious, no one does this. No one does this. If you did this, you would stand out like, holy shit! Like, it'd be incredible, and you'd be very targeted because you're not creating things in a vacuum. You're creating things based on people's advice.
Yeah.
So you actually like have their validation that what I'm doing is actually relevant in industry, and then you apply it, right? Yeah, and then so you're building like the slow burn with like the daily LinkedIn posting, and then the showing you have the right work style with the daily committing, and then
Yeah.
you're building your knowledge about the real world by doing informational interviews with data scientists and hiring managers.
I think it sounds. It's first of all, it's really smart, and I really like that you're not, you're not holding yourself back by the side project. You're saying this is good
Hmm.
enough. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to show people what I'm doing, and
Hmm.
and then from there, then you have, you have your projects that's out there. You're communicating it to people who sees it.
Hmm.
People are interested in this. And I think a lot of people who wants to do this today, they want to learn things, and they're like, I have to learn this
Hmm.
before I want to apply. I want to
Hmm.
do this before I even talk to anyone about this.
Yes,
I,
definitely.
I
Hmm.
tell that to people all the time. I tell, they ask me about, okay, like, do you have a good idea for a project? And I say, maybe I do, but how many applications have you sent out? How many resumes? How many people have
Hmm.
you pitched it to? How many you've spoken to? It's never going to be perfect anyways. So you might as well put it out there because someone is going to appreciate it for
Yes,
sure. If
someone
the
will.
right person finds it, he's going to see business value in it. It's just about making that match and then getting it all the
So
way.
many companies will just find the linear your generalized linear models like incredibly useful. Like those were a lot
Oh,
of the models I
huge.
built in my first job. Yeah. And there's another benefit to imperfect side projects, which is that I used to think at that time, 2016, and also 2018, when I was trying to get my next job, um, that if I post something bad, then I need to be like fully ready and know everything so that I look like world class, which was pretty hard to do with all the other things I was doing at the time, right? And it made you feel just stressed and not want to do anything, to be honest,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So, what if you post something imperfect and extremely basic? What it gives you the opportunity to do is show how fast you can learn new things. So what you can do is post something very basic and be like, I learned, and then I want to improve this module, like the modeling aspect, and let me try learning this class of model and then adding it to the pipeline and seeing what happens. And then you're like, I'm going to try to do this in 3 days, and then you do it in 3 days, and then that's an interview story, like learned, applied X new concept in 3 days or something like that. So
Yeah.
you can show actually how fast you can learn and apply new things, which is really beneficial in industry because no one expects you to come in knowing everything. That would be silly. But if you can talk about like the meta skill of learning and applying quickly,
Yeah.
that would make you stand out with everybody else.
For someone watching today, maybe they are a data analyst. The data science role is extremely popular in
Mm,
2022. So if you meet someone, you see that they come up to you and they ask you, hey, like, I'm a data analyst. I saw you on LinkedIn. Can I ask you something? How can I transcend into data science? What is your kind of short recommendation for me?
hmm. Yeah, it's good. Also a good question. I could be like hours and hours of
Yeah.
description, but it depends on where you're starting from. And then I would say there are two, you can break skills into two aspects. One
Yeah.
is requirements no matter what. And then there's a much bigger field of not required, but specializations that will make you stand out.
Okay.
The missing part that I think a lot of people don't think about when they think about how do I go from A to B
Yeah.
career wise is thinking about themselves. Like, what are their tendencies? What do they actually like?
Yeah.
And so what I do is I think I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this. That was one of my more popular ones. It was like a process of doing this. It'd be like list all the skills that are in data science, then basically find the overlap of you just find like what's really required, but then also pick several things that you think could differentiate you from the competition that aren't required. Like I'm going to lean into visualization. I'm going to lean into really good like software engineering principles. I'm going to learn. I'm going to write things object oriented. I'm going to make sure my code is extensible and reusable. Maybe as an analyst, you wrote a lot of like code, and so maybe then you're better at that. It starts like from where you are, and then you pick like their requirements, right? Like the like statistical thinking, understanding experimental design, um,
Mm.
understanding like the basics of what machine learning is and what it does, and then some of the basic classes of models, I guess, like supervised versus unsupervised. There's like clustering, grouping data together. There's dimensionality reduction. There's those things. There's like special classes of problems, like time series. There's regression or classification.
Yeah.
There's so you like list these areas. Like you start big,
Yeah.
and then you're like, hey, this is most interesting to me. So I'm going to start with this and this and this,
Okay.
and I would say a combination of required, like non-negotiable requirements plus like differentiators, strategic differentiators. For me, my differentiators were focusing on visualization and communication skills. That's what
Okay.
I thought when I was in my first job. Like if I won't differentiate on math, then I'll differentiate on, and then eventually it was also understanding the business problem. So
Yeah.
being able to frame the question really well and linking the business thing to like metrics, like because this is what we're trying to do, I'm going to use this metric and not these other five metrics to assess my performance.
You have some of those, you just gotta have them because that's just
Mhm.
the backbone of it. But then you can. I really like the idea of figuring out which one plays to the most of you as a person when you specialize, because those are probably the ones that you're gonna have the most fun with and that you're really gonna talk about with passion and carry and
Mm,
actually want to get good in. So
mm, that's right.
uh,
That's right.
it must be a huge advantage also because in data science and there's so many um, skills that you actually can use in industries and yeah, okay.
Mhm.
No, definitely. Okay.
Yep.
So I have one last one is I try to do like a quick bullet point 5 tips for prospective data professionals today. what would be your short list in no specific order, top of mind?
Five bullets. Okay. Apply what you've learned every day is probably what I'd say. I don't necessarily mean submit resumes. I don't think resumes submissions are necessarily the best way to get jobs because there's, especially the entry level, there's uh so many people applying, and
Right.
it's not like, but if you build a human connection, that's the best probably.
Yeah.
Confirm everything you think you know. Everything you think you know. So that's number two.
Mm.
Meaning, if you think, if you make a list of skills and you're like, these are required and these are my strategic differentiators, how are you going to prove that that these are actually the requirements, right?
Yeah.
Well, you'd probably do it like in informational interviews. You'd probably do it talking to people, or like you'd see lots of descriptions that list those things, and then you have more proof. Another part of proof is knowing yourself. Like for example, I now I enjoy real estate. I didn't think I would enjoy it necessarily. It seemed a little boring compared to like the cool deep learning stuff that people do.
Yeah.
Music generation or image or text. I like text a lot too. Um, but now I learned to really enjoy it, and like the problems are just as difficult, actually often more difficult, because and then it was like, it still makes me think really hard, which is what I fundamentally enjoy about this. And you only prove things by doing things, like by acting, by doing a side project and actually determining, do I like this? Focus on your
Yeah.
bottleneck.
What is
So
holding you
this,
back?
for example, yes, your bottleneck in terms of like what you want to do. So you want to get a job, right? Is your
Yeah.
bottleneck getting interviews? Is your bottleneck passing interviews? Depends. Is your bottleneck,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like you can be strategic and you think like, where is the point where I can get the most return for the least effort, or that will most uh, quickly advance me towards my goal, and then
Yeah.
focus on, like, if I like, for me, I was like getting interviews, I was able to do good research where I could pitches, but I wasn't passing them. So then I realized, oh, I need to like enhance. um it actually wasn't really enhancing my technical skills, it was more like enhancing my technical interview skills, which is a different thing. It's almost like learning for the test.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so like focus on your bottleneck, and then that is the key to a self-directed learning journey, the self-taught thing.
Yeah.
Because then you're able to guide yourself. If you know, like, if you have a process for like how to get a job. My fifth piece of advice is probably skip the line. I
Mm.
really think that the skill of cold cold pitching, or even
Mm.
like warm pitching, where say you send an email to someone like, I really want to learn about this space, I think I'm interested in it, and I'm interested in data science, but I don't actually know the main kinds of problems you solve. I wonder if we could talk for 15 minutes or something about it, because I'm thinking of doing a side project related to this area, and I want to know, like, what are the actual things you're doing every day? What are the actual problems you face?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who would say no to requests like that, but also we never get them. Like, no one ever asks us that. Like, man, I'm really into real estate,
True.
but I haven't. No, I'm like, well, okay. That's like, because most people want to help others learn. Like, it shows hunger, and also doesn't it shows no doesn't show desperation. So then when you're like in those conversations, you can be like, okay, I'm gonna like start this side project, and I'm gonna like, is it okay if I keep you updated every like 2 weeks or something? And or maybe if I have like a really quick question, like I could ask you, and then you start building that long term relationship, and
Yeah.
then they'll be like, yeah, I want this guy to work for us as an entry level. Like, let's join us. Even in
Mm.
startups, they would do that because it shows like a lot of initiative and gumption, but it's not
Mhm.
that hard to do. Like, this is actually very easy to do.
Yeah, no, I think I think that's also quite good, and I think it really, in a way, kind of encapsulates a lot of the things you said, which is, a very proactive way of going about this towards building relationships, communicating, kind of taking it beyond all those technical skills.
Yeah.
Before we we wrap this up, for anyone watching that maybe want to reach out to you, anything that you might have coming up. I know you write a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Where can they find you, and what can we kind of expect from you? And especially,
Hmm.
if they see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, what kind of stuff do you write there, and what are you currently working on?
Yeah. So I'd say the number one place to find me is follow me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll
Yeah,
have a link or something like that, but that's where I write. I write 5 days a week for the most part. Sometimes I'm inspired and write something silly or shorter on Saturday, but otherwise it's 5 days a week.
yeah,
And I write, I'd say I write in a class of there's a couple categories I write for. I write about like data science in industry, and then basically processes for entry level or aspiring data scientists to actually build the skills for industry in self directed or unconventional ways,
Yeah.
usually involving some combination of talking to people and applying every day, in order to show positive qualities.
Yeah.
That's one thing I write about. Another thing I write about is data science leadership. So insights basically on the meta of data science, like how does it work in organizations, and I try to distill everything into like processes and like actionable concrete tips based on principles. Like for example, like if you have a team, how should you hire? Should you hire everyone to be a generalist?
Yeah.
No. Eventually you need to hire people who complement each other, you know, and or something like that, for example, or like communicating to the business, or like structuring a project in the first place, or any manner of things related to data science leadership. Yeah, like leading, growing the function. So that's like the two main things. Probably a third thing topic I write about is like productivity and personal development as
Yeah.
applied to data scientists and technologists. I have this mindset that self discipline is weak. Self discipline. I mean, because a lot of people in our field tend to emphasize like working long hours, working all the time, going late, waking early, pushing through pain.
Yeah.
And I don't actually like this mindset, because person only has so much energy. It's kind of like I think of discipline as kind of like driving with the parking brake on. There's a lot of
Yeah.
friction, and you won't really go as fast as you could go if you were to make
No.
it smooth. So I really try to emphasize like figuring out ways of working that are smooth for you, so
Yeah.
that you can remove the parking brake and actually go and actually flow in your work rather than um, feeling resistance. So this will be things like recently I made a post about like a 5-step flow state checklist. I keep it on my desk, right? That's probably actually graying out because it's
No, no,
person.
yeah.
Yeah, but I basically on this list I wrote down 5 short questions
Uh-huh.
that every time before I'm about to do something I review them, and these are like the characteristics of the flow state. So if I can say yes to all of them, then it's like I have a much higher chance of reaching flow. And then my
Yeah.
work is like, and then I'm like 10x. I'm literally 10x more productive than if I'm not in flow, where I'll just be like in the gray zone of half working, half not, which is
Yeah.
bad. So I write about
Enjoying
things
it.
like this too. Yeah. So productivity stuff, which is actually I think more different than anything else I write, because no one in our field talks about like they just talk about like work life balance or taking breaks, but they don't necessarily talk about how to be productive and work with flow and stuff like that. So that's something I
I
really
also,
enjoy.
yeah, I also haven't seen people like drill into that, especially like within how it can be for people who work in data related
Hmm.
careers. So that's
Yes.
also really cool.
Yeah. As far as stuff I have coming up, uh, yeah. So I'm writing a report for like data science leaders. I'm basically
Yeah.
interviewing fellow data science leaders to write essentially the document I wish I had when I started as a leader. So it's kind of like advice for new leaders from
Yeah.
current leaders, because we've gone through hard knocks, like we've experienced trials and tribulations. And having had some of those experiences, I became motivated to create something that would prevent future me's, like me from 2 years ago, prevent them from experiencing some of those things that I did with
Okay.
foresight and knowledge. So I've basically been interviewing data science leaders, just to like figure out and then find like trends, and then compile all their advice into like a short report, like a very action oriented report, but still grounded in fundamental principles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
the other thing is I really think that skills, sales skills like cold email, doing good research, how to ask good questions, that sort of thing are really important. So I'm going to be starting to build a course on that very soon.
Yeah. Nice.
Just like yeah, how to like basically the concrete benefit is like get a job without submitting a resume, but
Yeah.
the long-term benefit is like really communication skills and understanding psychology, which will help you like in your entire life.
Yeah. I think that'll be really interesting when you have that ready, and that kind
Hmm.
of ready to go, because that's also if you go on Coursera or Skillshare, wherever, and you search for SQL courses, you'll find 5,000. If you
Oh
search
yeah.
for data psychology or communication data analysis or communication data science, you'll find literally probably zero. So I think
Hmm.
that's super, super interesting, to be honest. That's really cool. So I'll definitely want to try and look out for that one and see how you've solved that.
Hmm.
But okay, I really appreciate you, taking the time, sitting down, sharing your thoughts, and talking to me, in 2022. It's cool that you can reach out to someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, you want to sit down and have like a virtual coffee or chat, and I want to hear how your days are and how you handle these things. So I really, really appreciate it, and I think a lot of people watching this will really appreciate it. Richad.
Absolutely. I had a lot of fun. It's always good to hear questions I've not heard before and be like, oh, how would I answer that? Damn.
If you have any questions to the topics discussed in the video, then let me know in the comment section. Thank you, Richad, again for taking the time to having this talk with me. Subscribe for more data career talks, and I'll see you guys next week.